Cassandra Mitchell, 32, staring at my phone in disbelief, trembling hands replaying the voicemail. Cassie, it's Dad. Mom and I discussed it, and we've decided you're out of the family business. Your office has been cleared. Don't come in Monday. 10 years of sacrificing everything for Mitchell home renovations, working 60-hour weeks, postponing my own life, gone in a 15-second message. What they didn't know. I discovered their secret accounting books yesterday, revealing they'd been hiding millions and planning to sell the company behind my back all along. I still remember exactly where I was standing when my life imploded. Funny how trauma burns every detail into your memory. If you've ever experienced that gut-wrenching moment when you realize your own family has betrayed you, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you've ever had to deal with family business drama. Hit that like button if you've ever discovered someone wasn't who you thought they were, and subscribe to join me on this journey of how I turned the tables on my own parents' betrayal. Trust me, the ending of this story might surprise you as much as that voicemail surprised me. I always thought I knew what my life would look like. From the time I was little, Mitchell Home Renovations wasn't just my family's business, it was our identity. My grandparents, Margaret and Joseph Mitchell, started it in their garage in 1973. They built it from nothing, one kitchen remodel at a time, into one of the most respected renovation companies in Colorado. Growing up, I spent summers filing paperwork and winters watching my grandfather transform homes with his skilled hands. The sawdust and paint smell was more comforting to me than cookies baking in an oven. My path seemed predestined. I pursued my MBA at Wharton, graduating with honors and turning down six-figure offers from prestigious firms in New York and Chicago. My classmates thought I was crazy. Why would you go back to a family business when you could start at Morgan Stanley? They'd ask. But I had a vision. I wanted to take what my grandparents built and transform it for the modern era. Plus, my parents had promised me since I was 16 that someday the company would be mine. Cassandra, one day all of this will be yours to lead, my father Richard would say, gesturing around the office. He was a tall, imposing figure with salt and pepper hair and the kind of handshake that made contractors wince. My mother Eleanor, always elegant and reserved, would nod in agreement, though she rarely voiced her own opinions when my father was in the room. When I joined full-time in 2014, I hit the ground running. I completely revolutionized our digital presence, creating virtual home tours before they were common. I established an eco-friendly renovation division that attracted wealthy, environmentally conscious clients willing to pay premium prices. Revenue doubled in my first 3 years. We expanded from 10 employees to 35. Mitchell Home Renovations was featured in Architectural Digest, and I was named one of 30 under 30 business innovators in our region. The success came at a personal cost. Ryan, my fiancé of 2 years, finally reached his breaking point after I canceled our anniversary dinner to handle an emergency with a high-profile client. Cassie, I can't keep competing with the business, he said that night, his voice tired rather than angry. I want to build a life together, have kids before we're 40, travel sometimes. But you're married to that company. I tried to explain that I was building something that would support our future family for generations, but he couldn't see past the present. The next morning, he was gone, leaving his ring on our kitchen counter. I told myself it was a necessary sacrifice. Someone who truly loved me would understand my dedication. My uncle Philip was the only one who seemed to truly appreciate my vision. My father's younger brother had helped build the company alongside my grandparents, but had always remained in my father's shadow despite his brilliant design sense. He became my mentor, teaching me the subtleties of client relationships and craftsmanship that no business school could. "You remind me of your grandmother," he told me once. She had that same fire, that unwillingness to accept the status quo. Richard takes after your grandfather, more cautious, more traditional. Those differences in approach became increasingly apparent as I pushed for modernization while my parents clung to the way we've always done things. When I wanted to invest in digital marketing, my father insisted newspaper ads were sufficient. When I suggested sustainable materials, My mother worried about profit margins. Every innovation required battles that left me exhausted. Despite the friction, we achieved unprecedented success. Last year, we landed a contract to renovate the historic Aspen Valley Hotel, a project worth $7 million. It was my pitch that won it, my vision for maintaining the building's historic character while introducing modern sustainability elements. The day we signed the contract, even my father had to admit I'd done something remarkable. "Good work, Cassie," he said, patting my shoulder awkwardly. From him, that was equivalent to a standing ovation. But something shifted after that win. I began noticing closed-door meetings that I wasn't invited to. My parents would abruptly end phone calls when I walked into rooms. My mother started asking odd questions about client contracts and intellectual property ownership. I brushed it off as paranoia at first. After all, these were my parents. They had raised me to value honesty and integrity above all else. "Family businesses survive on trust," my grandfather used to say. "The moment that's gone, you have nothing." I was about to discover how right he was. The discovery happened by accident, as these things often do. I was preparing for a meeting with a potential client, looking for our portfolio of similar projects we completed. I needed a specific file from the shared drive, but it wasn't where it should be. After searching fruitlessly, I decided to check my father's computer while he was at lunch with my mother. I found the portfolio easily enough, but also noticed a folder labeled WR Negotiations that hadn't been there the week before. Curiosity got the better of me. WR wasn't any client project I recognized, and as director of operations, I should have known every active file. The folder contained dozens of documents. Financial statements that looked nothing like the ones I reviewed monthly, bank account information for entities I'd never heard of, and most disturbing, a comprehensive company valuation from an independent assessor that valued Mitchell Home Renovations at $12 million. $12 million. According to our official books that I had access to, we were worth approximately $4 million. My hands shook as I opened more files. I found email correspondence between my father and someone named Marcus Harrington from Westridge Development Corporation. The emails discussed acquisition terms, transition timelines, and post-sale consultancy arrangements for my parents. The most recent email contained a final offer, $12 million for complete acquisition, with my parents retained as consultants for 2 years at $300,000 annually each. Not once was my name mentioned. Not once did anyone discuss what would happen to me, despite my 15% ownership stake that my grandfather had insisted I receive when he passed away 3 years ago. I was still processing this information when I heard voices approaching, my parents returning from lunch. I quickly copied the key files to a flash drive, closed everything, and slipped out the back entrance of my father's office, my mind reeling. That evening, I drove to my Uncle Philip's house, desperate for perspective. His modest bungalow was a stark contrast to my parents' mansion, reflecting his priorities of craftsmanship over ostentation. He looked surprised to see me on his doorstep, especially in such a disheveled state. "Cassie, what's wrong?" he asked, ushering me inside. I showed him everything. The hidden accounts, the secret valuation, the acquisition negotiations. His face grew increasingly grim. "I suspected something was happening, but not this," he said finally. "Richard mentioned exploring options for the future, but I assumed he meant succession planning, maybe bringing in partners." He rubbed his forehead. "Have you confronted them?" "Not yet. I wanted to understand what I was dealing with first." Uncle Philip nodded slowly. "That's wise. But Cassie, you need to be prepared. Your father, he can be ruthless when cornered." The next morning, I walked into my parents' home unannounced. They were having breakfast on their patio overlooking the mountains, looking relaxed in a way that made my blood boil considering what they were secretly planning. "I know about Westridge," I said without preamble. "I know about the $12 million offer. I know you're hiding money and planning to sell the company without telling me." The transformation in my father's face was instantaneous. Shock, then anger, then a cold calculation I'd seen him use with difficult contractors. "You went through my private files?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Answer the question, Dad." Are you selling the company that you promised would be mine someday? My mother set down her teacup. Cassandra, business decisions need to be made with the head, not the heart. The market is uncertain, and this offer provides security for everyone. Security? What about my 15% stake? What about my 10 years of work? What about your promise? My father stood. Promises change as circumstances change. We built this company, and we'll decide its future. Your minority stake doesn't give you veto power. And the hidden accounts? The tax fraud? I challenged. He slammed his hand on the table. That's enough. You're overstepping, Cassandra. Go cool off, and we'll discuss this later when you're thinking rationally. I left, shaking with rage and hurt. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, trying to decide my next move. I even called Uncle Philip again, who advised caution and gathering more information before making any decisions. I never got the chance. The following evening, while I was picking up dinner, my phone rang. I missed the call, but the voicemail notification appeared moments later. My father's voice, clinical and detached. Cassie, it's Dad. Mom and I discussed it, and we've decided you're out of the family business. Your office has been cleared. Don't come in Monday. Just like that. 10 years of my life, erased in 15 seconds. I played it for Uncle Philip when I called him in tears. There was a long silence after the message ended. Philip, are you still there? His voice, when he finally spoke, contained a fury I'd never heard from my gentle uncle. I've stood by my brother through a lot of questionable decisions, but this crosses every line. He's gone too far. What do I do now? I asked, feeling more lost than I ever had. You fight, he said simply. And I'll help you. To understand how we reached this breaking point, you need to know more about the Mitchell family dynamics. From the outside, we projected the image of a harmonious family unit successfully working together. The reality was far more complicated. Growing up as Richard Mitchell's daughter meant constantly striving to earn approval that was rarely given. My father believed praise made people complacent, so accomplishments were acknowledged with brief nods while failures received lengthy critiques. My mother, Eleanor, rarely contradicted him openly, but would sometimes smooth things over in private, explaining, "Your father just wants you to be strong enough for this world." My younger brother Thomas had a different experience entirely. For years my junior, he showed early talent in music rather than business. When he announced at 18 that he wanted to pursue music production instead of joining Mitchell Home Renovations, my parents were surprisingly supportive. They funded his recording studio startup, paid for his apartment in Los Angeles, and never questioned his frequent financial emergencies. Meanwhile, I worked summers at the company without pay to learn the business from the ground up. It's different with Thomas. My mother once explained when I questioned the double standard. This business isn't his passion like it is yours. But it wasn't just about Thomas. The gender bias in our family had deep roots. My grandfather, despite his love for me, had originally planned to leave his ownership shares exclusively to male heirs. It was my grandmother who fought to change his mind. Margaret actually threatened to divorce him if he didn't reconsider, Uncle Philip told me years later. She said, "I didn't help build this company to have my granddaughter treated like she's worth less than the boys." Grandfather eventually created a trust that guaranteed me some ownership, though still less than what Thomas would have received had he stayed. Throughout my career at Mitchell Home Renovations, I fought constant subtle undermining. Clients would compliment my father on design concepts I had created. Employees would double-check my decisions with him. Trade publications would interview him about innovations I had implemented. Each time, my father accepted the credit without correction. Our Sunday family dinners became a masterclass in compartmentalization. My mother enforced a strict no business talk at the table rule, which I now realize was less about work-life balance and more about keeping family conversations separate from business realities. We could spend hours discussing Thomas's latest music project or my cousin's wedding plans, but never address the power dynamics and inequities that shaped our daily work lives. After receiving that voicemail, I spent days poring over family photos and business records, seeing patterns I'd previously missed. In nearly every company milestone photo, I was positioned at the edge while my father occupied the center. In meeting minutes, my suggestions were recorded as additional ideas to consider, while my father's became strategic directives. Most revealing was a conversation I had with my grandmother Rose before she passed away 2 years ago. From her nursing home bed, she had grasped my hand and said, "Watch the accounts, Cassie. Your grandfather and I built this business honestly, but your father has always been too clever for his own good." I had attributed her warning to confusion from her medication. Now, I realized she had been trying to prepare me. A week after the voicemail, I received a text from my cousin Jennifer inviting me to lunch. We had never been particularly close, so I was suspicious of her sudden interest. Over salads at an overpriced bistro, she eventually revealed the real purpose of our meeting. "I thought you should know," she said, looking uncomfortable. "Everyone in the family knows about the sale. Uncle Richard told everyone at his birthday party last month. Everyone knew except me." I asked, my fork suspended midair. Jennifer nodded. "I assumed you were on board. Uncle Richard said you were taking a generous separation package to pursue other opportunities." The betrayal expanded beyond my parents to encompass my entire extended family. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all had known about my impending professional execution and said nothing. They had smiled at me at family gatherings while keeping my parents' secret. The most painful revelation came from Thomas, who finally returned my calls after days of silence. Over video chat from his Los Angeles apartment, he admitted he'd known about the sale for months. "I thought you were part of the decision, Cass," he claimed, though his eyes couldn't quite meet mine. "Dad said it was a family decision. And you didn't think to ask me directly? Your sister?" He shrugged. "Business stuff is between you and them. I stay out of it." "Are you getting a cut of the sale?" I asked pointedly. His hesitation told me everything. "Dad set up a trust for me, for my future projects. While I get nothing for 10 years of work, that seems fair." He had the decency to look ashamed.
"I'm sorry, Cassie.
"I should have asked you directly." In that moment, I realized a fundamental truth. I had never been viewed as an equal partner in the Mitchell family, either personally or professionally. Despite my education, my innovations, my dedication, I remained the daughter who needed to prove herself, while my brother remained the son who was supported unconditionally. The question now was what to do with this clarity. As the shock subsided, determination took its place. If they wanted to play hardball, they would discover I was my grandmother's granddaughter after all. I feel like I need to pause here and check in with you all. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any other kind, doesn't it? That moment when you realize the people who should have your back are actually stabbing you in it? If you're still with me on this journey, drop a like to let me know I'm not alone in these experiences. The next part is where I started fighting back, and trust me, they never saw it coming. The morning after my conversation with Thomas, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt since before the voicemail. I'd spent enough time feeling hurt. Now it was time for action. My first call was to Natalie Pearson, a law school friend who specialized in business litigation. We met at her office downtown, where I laid out everything. "Well, they can't just erase your 15% ownership," Natalie said after reviewing my documents. "That's yours regardless of employment status. But we need to understand exactly what they're planning with this sale." She explained that as a minority owner, I had certain rights they couldn't circumvent, including access to accurate financial information and potential claims against fiduciary duty breaches. The hidden accounts and misrepresented company value? That's serious, Cassie. It's not just unethical. It could be illegal tax fraud and securities violations. What about whistleblower protections? I asked. If I report the hidden accounts? Natalie's expression turned grave. Whistleblower status would offer some protection, but are you prepared to potentially send your parents to prison? That's what we might be talking about with this level of financial misconduct. The question hit me hard. Despite everything, could I be responsible for my parents facing criminal charges? The answer wasn't immediate, but I knew I needed more information before making any decisions. My next step was contacting trusted employees. Meredith Jones had been our office manager for 15 years and had always been more loyal to the company than to any individual. I asked her to meet me at a coffee shop far from our usual haunts. "I've been waiting for you to call," she said as soon as she sat down. "Things are chaotic at the office. Your father announced your departure on Monday morning with no explanation. Meredith, I need to know what's happening inside. What documents are moving, what meetings are occurring, everything." She didn't hesitate. "I've worked for your family since you were in high school, Cassie. What your parents are doing isn't right." She reached into her bag and pulled out a USB drive. "I've been making copies of everything that crosses my desk. Financial records, meeting minutes, emails about the Westridge deal. They don't realize I'm automatically CC'd on most internal communications." The USB drive contained invaluable information, including a draft purchase agreement with concerning clauses about management restructuring and intellectual property reassignment that would essentially erase my contributions to the company's growth. Armed with more information, I arranged another meeting with Uncle Philip. We met at his workshop where he crafted custom furniture as a creative outlet. The smell of cedar and varnish was comforting as we spread documents across his workbench. "They've been planning this for at least 18 months, Philip said, reviewing email timestamps. "Since right after the Aspen Valley Hotel contract, the one you secured." "That was our biggest success," I said, confused. "Why would that trigger them to sell?" Philip's expression was sad. "Because it was undeniably your success, not Richard's. I think it confirmed their greatest fear. That you've outgrown them. That the company's future is more secure in your hands than theirs." We constructed a timeline of suspicious activities, the creation of shell companies, unusual cash transfers, meetings with Westridge representatives, the gradual exclusion of me from strategic discussions. The pattern was unmistakable once laid out chronologically. "What's your next move?" Philip asked. "I'm still deciding about the tax fraud reporting," I admitted. "But I'm definitely securing my client relationships. I've built personal connections with our top 20 clients, and legally, those relationships aren't company property." That evening, I began calling key clients, framing my outreach as courtesy calls about my career change. Many expressed shock at my departure and concerns about their ongoing projects. Marcus Bellamy, the developer behind the Aspen Valley Hotel renovation, was particularly direct. "Cassandra, your vision is why we chose Mitchell. If you're not involved, we may need to reconsider our contract." I carefully documented every call, establishing that client relationships were tied to me personally. It wasn't about sabotage. It was about preserving what I had built. The next critical decision involved the IRS information. After a sleepless night, I submitted an anonymous tip about potential tax fraud at Mitchell Home Renovations, providing just enough information to trigger an investigation without directly implicating my parents. It felt like a compromise between justice and family loyalty, though I wasn't sure either side would see it that way. My final strategic move that week involved reaching out to Rebecca Zhang, my childhood friend who now worked as an investigative reporter for the Business Journal. We met at a hiking trail outside the city where we could talk without fear of being overheard. "I'm not asking you to write anything yet," I clarified as we walked. "I just need someone who understands how these corporate takeovers work and can help me identify what I'm missing." Rebecca listened intently, occasionally stopping to take notes. "Based on what you're describing, Westridge might be using your parents to acquire the company cheaply before flipping it. They typically renovate a few properties, rebrand, and resell at a premium. Your parents may not realize they're being used as much as they're using you." Her perspective added another dimension to my understanding. This wasn't just about my parents betraying me. They might be unwittingly setting up the company my grandparents built for dismantling. "Whatever you decide to do, document everything," Rebecca advised. "Not just for potential legal action, but because someday you might want to understand why this all happened." That night, I organized everything I had gathered into a secure cloud folder: financial records, email correspondence, client call notes, legal advice. Looking at it all together, I felt a strange mix of sadness and strength. The evidence of betrayal was painful, but knowledge was power. For the first time since that voicemail, I felt like I had options. As I closed my laptop, my phone lit up with a text from my father. Family meeting tomorrow. 3 p.m. Home. After a week of silence, they were finally ready to talk. But so was I, and I wasn't coming unprepared. I know many of you watching have faced moments when you had to decide between speaking up or staying silent. When you had to choose between accepting injustice or fighting back, especially against your own family. This turning point was the hardest decision I've ever made. If this resonates with you, let me know in the comments what you would have done in my situation. Would you have gone to that family meeting? Sometimes hearing how others handled similar crossroads helps us make sense of our own choices. Now, let me tell you what happened when I walked into that house ready for battle. The family home I arrived at that Sunday afternoon was the same Georgian colonial my parents had purchased when I was 12. 5 bedrooms, manicured gardens, and a sweeping driveway where my father's Mercedes and my mother's Range Rover were now parked. Also present were Thomas's Audi, Uncle Philip's practical Toyota, and 2 vehicles I didn't recognize. My mother answered the door with a tight smile. Cassandra, thank you for coming. Her formal tone suggested this was a business meeting rather than a family reconciliation. In the living room, I found quite the gathering. My father standing by the fireplace in his power pose, Thomas slouched uncomfortably on the sofa, Uncle Philip perched tensely at the window, my father's lawyer, Gerald Winston, and a man I didn't recognize but assumed was from Westridge Development. Cassandra, my father began without preamble. We've asked you here to discuss the transition of Mitchell home renovations and to address your concerns. You mean my discovery of your hidden accounts and secret sale plans? I replied, remaining standing despite my mother's gesture toward an empty chair. Gerald Winston cleared his throat. Ms. Mitchell, I'd advise against making unfounded accusations. We're here to discuss a generous separation package that recognizes your contributions while allowing the company to move in a new direction. A direction that involves selling to Westridge for $12 million while reporting only $4 million to minimize tax obligations. I asked, watching their faces carefully. The unknown man, definitely from Westridge, shifted uncomfortably. My father's expression hardened. Cassandra, you're misinterpreting normal business operations, my father said dismissively. The company's future requires decisions that emotion can't dictate. We're offering $300,000 as severance, which is more than fair. Fair. I laughed without humor. I own 15% of a $12 million company, which equals $1.8 million. And that doesn't include compensation for the client relationships I've built or the intellectual property I've developed. Thomas suddenly spoke up. Cassie, don't make this ugly. Mom and Dad built this company. They deserve to retire on their terms. I turned to him, feeling a new wave of betrayal. They built it with Grandfather and Uncle Philip, and I've helped grow it for 10 years. And you're getting a trust fund from the sale, while having contributed nothing. That's enough. My father thundered. This is exactly why we made this decision without you. You're too emotional, too entitled. This company existed before you, and will continue without you. The room fell silent until Uncle Philip finally stood. Richard, I've kept quiet for decades while you took credit for joint decisions and marginalized my contributions. I won't watch you do the same to Cassandra. My father looked genuinely shocked. Philip had always been his supporter, his shadow. This doesn't concern you, Philip, doesn't it? Philip countered. I own 20% of Mitchell Home Renovations. Our parents ensured that. Have you disclosed that to Westridge? Or were you planning to handle my shares the same way you're handling Cassandra's? The Westridge representative looked alarmed. Mr. Mitchell, you assured us you had authority to negotiate for all shareholders. My father's face flushed with anger. Philip, we can discuss your portion separately. This meeting is about Cassandra's unreasonable demands. Her legal rights, Philip corrected. And I stand with her. My mother, who had remained silent, suddenly spoke. Richard, Perhaps we should reconsider. If Philip and Cassandra are aligned. Eleanor, not now, my father snapped. Yes, now, she replied with uncharacteristic firmness. Your mother called me this morning. She knows something is happening with the company, and she's concerned. My grandmother Rose, though physically frail at 84, remained mentally sharp and commanded respect in our family. My father's expression flickered with the first uncertainty I'd seen. The meeting devolved from there. Gerald Winston advised adjourning until cooler heads prevailed. The Westridge representative excused himself with obvious concerns about the deal. My father stormed out to his study, while my mother followed, apologizing for the misunderstanding. Thomas approached me as I was leaving. Cassie, I didn't know the whole story. I swear. You didn't want to know, I corrected him. It was easier to take what they offered without questioning it. That's been your approach your whole life. The real fallout came at Thanksgiving, traditionally held at my grandmother's assisted living facility in their private dining room. The tension was palpable as we gathered around a table pretending normalcy. My grandmother, wheelchair-bound but regal in her favorite blue dress, observed us all with shrewd eyes. Midway through the meal, she set down her fork with deliberate precision. Someone tell me what's happening to my company. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, my father attempted damage control. Mom, we're exploring strategic options for the future. Nothing to concern yourself with. Richard Anthony Mitchell, she said, using his full name as only a mother can. I may be old, but I'm not stupid. Philip called me. Cassandra visited yesterday. Now I want to hear from you. When my father hesitated, I spoke up. They're selling the company to Westridge Development for $12 million without properly accounting for it or honoring minority shareholders' rights. Is this true? She asked my father directly. His response was defensive. The business landscape has changed. This deal secures our retirement and the family's financial future. By stealing from your daughter and brother? My grandmother asked sharply. That's not the company your father and I built. The facade cracked. My father and mother on one side, Uncle Philip and I on the other, with various family members uncomfortably choosing sides. Cousins who had vacation homes partially funded by my parents defended their right to retire. Aunts who had benefited from company largesse suggested I was being ungrateful. Only my grandmother's sister Irene openly supported us, reminding everyone how hard my grandparents had worked to build an ethical business. Thomas, in a surprising turn, finally broke his pattern of avoiding conflict. Dad, if what Grandma and Cassie are saying is true, this isn't right. You always taught us about integrity. My father's response was cutting. When you've built something with your own hands instead of playing with music toys in California, you can lecture me about business decisions. The meal ended abruptly, with my grandmother declaring herself tired and my mother in tears. In the parking lot afterward, the division solidified as family members departed without the usual hugs and promises to call soon. The following week brought escalation. Gerald Winston sent a cease and desist letter claiming I was violating confidentiality agreements and interfering with business relationships. My parents' personal number no longer accepted my calls. Worse, clients began reporting that my father was telling them I had left the company due to personal issues and implying I was unstable. The situation reached a breaking point when Westridge Development officially withdrew their offer, citing unforeseen complications regarding shareholder consensus and potential regulatory concerns. My father, desperate to salvage some deal, began entertaining interest from Blackwood Properties, a notorious company known for gutting businesses and selling off assets. Uncle Philip brought me this news with grim satisfaction. Richard is panicking. He's over-leveraged himself personally, expecting that Westridge money. Now he's willing to talk to anyone, even vultures like Blackwood. Why is he so desperate for this sale? I wondered aloud. The company is profitable. Why not just continue operations? Philip hesitated before answering. I think there's something he's not telling anyone. Something financial pushing him to sell quickly, regardless of terms. I would soon discover how right he was. By early December, nearly a month after that fateful voicemail, I had moved from defense to offense. Uncle Philip and I began developing an alternative business plan that would address whatever financial pressure was forcing my father's hand while preserving the company's integrity and our positions within it. Our first task was understanding exactly what made my parents so desperate to sell. Meredith continued providing inside information, including an overheard conversation between my father and his personal financial advisor that mentioned covering the Atlantic City losses before they're discovered. Atlantic City? My father had always claimed to despise gambling. With Rebecca's investigative help, we uncovered the truth. My father had a secret gambling problem that had escalated dramatically over the past 3 years. He had taken out personal loans using company assets as collateral and needed the Westridge money to cover approximately $4 million in gambling debts before they triggered default clauses that could force company liquidation. That explains the urgency and secrecy, Uncle Philip said when I shared this information. Richard would rather sell the company than admit he has a gambling addiction. Armed with this knowledge, we approached Catherine Harrington, CEO of Harrington Enterprises, a competitor with whom I had maintained respectful relations. Unlike Westridge, Harrington wasn't interested in gutting the company, but saw potential in our client base and reputation. I've always admired Mitchell's craftsmanship, Catherine said during our meeting. If you and Philip are involved long-term, we consider a partnership rather than full acquisition. By mid-December, we had a counter-proposal. Harrington would provide a $5 million investment for 40% ownership, with existing shareholders maintaining proportional stakes of the remaining 60%. The immediate cash injection would allow my father to address his gambling debts, while the company would continue operating with an expanded capability. Simultaneously, I began contacting key employees who had expressed concerns about the company's direction. Jacob Turner, our lead architect, Sophia Williams, our sustainable materials expert, Marcus Delgado, our project manager, all agreed they would follow me if I started a new venture. I didn't explicitly mention poaching them, but their loyalty was clear. The company isn't the same without you, Cassandra, Jacob told me. The creative energy is gone. Your father is just going through motions. Most powerfully, I reached out to our top clients. Marcus Bellamy from the Aspen Valley Hotel project was particularly supportive. I've put the next phase on hold, he informed me. My contract specifically names you as project lead. If you're not involved, I consider that a material breach. With clients representing 60% of our annual revenue expressing similar sentiments, I had significant leverage. The company's value without these relationships would plummet. Uncle Philip and I scheduled a meeting with my parents, requesting a neutral location and professional mediator. To our surprise, they agreed, suggesting they recognized the strength of our position. We met at a conference room in Natalie's law office, with Gerald Winston accompanying my parents and a court-appointed mediator facilitating. My mother looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and a nervous habit of twisting her wedding ring I'd never noticed before. My father maintained his stoic facade, but the strain showed in the tightness around his eyes. We have a proposal, I began, outlining the Harrington partnership and its benefits. The company stays in the family. The Mitchell name remains. And there's enough immediate capital to address any pressing financial concerns. My father's expression darkened at the implied knowledge of his gambling debts. You've been digging into my personal affairs. I've been trying to understand why you'd betray everything this company stands for, I countered. Why you'd throw away our family legacy for a quick payout. The mediator intervened, redirecting us to the proposal details. Gerald Winston raised numerous objections about management structure and decision-making authority, which we had anticipated and addressed in our documentation. After 2 hours of negotiation, we took a break. I found my mother alone in the hallway, looking out the window at the mountains in the distance. Why, Mom? I asked quietly. Why did you go along with this? She didn't turn. You don't understand what it's been like, Cassandra. Watching your father self-destruct, covering for him, trying to hold everything together. You could have come to me, to Philip. We could have helped. She finally faced me, tears in her eyes. Richard wouldn't allow it. His pride. He couldn't bear for you to know he'd failed, that he'd put everything at risk. So instead, he decided to sacrifice me? He convinced himself it was for the best, that you'd be better off starting fresh somewhere else, without the burden of his mistakes. She touched my arm hesitantly. I never wanted this, Cassie. I tried to talk him out of it. But you didn't stop him, I said, stepping back. You let him throw me away. When we reconvened, the atmosphere had shifted. My father, after consulting privately with Gerald, seemed resigned. Before we proceed, there's something you should know, he said. The gambling, it's worse than you've discovered. The total is closer to 6 million. Uncle Philip and I exchanged glances. This changed our calculations, but didn't derail them. We can adjust the Harrington offer, Philip said. Catherine indicated flexibility. And I have conditions, I added firmly. Complete financial transparency moving forward. I become CEO, with Dad stepping into an advisory role until full retirement. Mom remains Chief of Client Relations, if she wants. Philip's contributions are properly recognized and respected. My father started to object, but my mother placed her hand on his arm. Richard, it's time. Cassandra has earned this, and we need to make amends. After another hour of negotiation, we reached a framework agreement. Harrington Enterprises would invest $6 million for 45% ownership. My father would address his gambling addiction through a treatment program. The company would implement financial oversight controls with quarterly audits. And I would assume the CEO position, with my parents transitioning to advisory roles with defined responsibilities. As we prepared to leave, my father asked to speak with me privately. In a small side office, he seemed suddenly older, diminished. I never wanted to hurt you, Cassie, he said, his voice rough. I was trying to protect the company from my mistakes. By excluding me from the truth? By throwing away everything I've worked for? He shook his head. I convinced myself you would be better off with a fresh start. That my failure shouldn't drag you down too. He met my eyes directly for the first time in weeks. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. The apology was unexpected and insufficient, but it was a start. I'm not doing this for you, I told him. I'm doing it for Grandma and Grandpa's legacy, for the company they built honestly, for the employees who depend on us, and yes, for myself too. He nodded, understanding the terms of our new relationship. We wouldn't be father and daughter in the old way, at least not yet. We would be business associates working toward common goals, with trust to be rebuilt slowly, if at all. January brought a new year and a transformed Mitchell home renovations. The restructuring agreement was finalized 2 days before Christmas, providing my father the funds to address his gambling debts and enter a treatment program. Catherine Harrington proved to be a valuable strategic partner, bringing fresh perspectives while respecting our company heritage. My first official act as CEO was reinstating Uncle Philip as Chief Design Officer, a position that acknowledged his creative vision and decades of contribution. In our first executive meeting, watching him present his design concepts with newfound confidence, I glimpsed what the company might have been all along had everyone's talents been properly valued. Implementing financial transparency measures proved challenging, but necessary. We hired an independent accounting firm to conduct a comprehensive audit, which uncovered additional concerning practices beyond my father's gambling issues. Some dated back decades, reflecting an old-school approach to business that had no place in a modern, ethical company. Meredith, who had been instrumental in my information gathering, became our new operations director. I never thought I'd see this day, she confided during her first week in the position. Your grandfather would be so proud. My parents' adjustment to their new roles varied. My father, initially resistant to the advisory position, found unexpected purpose in mentoring our younger contractors on technical skills while attending his gambling recovery program. The hands-on work seemed to reconnect him with his original passion for craftsmanship before business pressures had intervened. My mother flourished in her role managing client relations, freed from my father's shadow to implement her own ideas about customer experience. I should have done this years ago, she admitted during a successful client dinner. I had more to contribute than I realized, Thomas surprised everyone by proposing a part-time role handling creative marketing for the company. His music production experience translated well to creating compelling visual and audio content for our digital platforms. Our first collaborative project, a virtual reality tour of the completed Aspen Valley Hotel renovation, won an Industry Innovation Award. Grandmother Rose insisted on legal documentation of the new succession plan, leaving nothing to chance or verbal promises. Learn from my mistakes, she told me during one of our weekly visits. Good intentions must be backed by proper paperwork. Personally, reconnecting with Ryan wasn't an option. He had become engaged to someone else 6 months after our breakup, a pediatrician named Melissa, who gave him the work-life balance he had always wanted. When we ran into each other at a charity event, the conversation was surprisingly comfortable. "You look happy, Cassie," he observed. "More centered." "I am," I realized as I said it. "This isn't how I expected to take over the company, but it feels right now." "You were always meant for this," he said kindly. "Sometimes the path just isn't what we expect." As winter turned to spring, Mitchell Home Renovations secured an even larger contract than the Aspen Valley project. The complete restoration of the historic Parkview Theater complex, a $20 million undertaking that would showcase our expertise in both preservation and modern sustainability. The company's new direction embraced my vision of sustainable building practices while maintaining the craftsmanship my grandparents had established. We created an apprenticeship program to train new craftspeople, addressing the industry-wide shortage of skilled laborers while creating opportunities in underserved communities. In April, we held our first family dinner since the Thanksgiving disaster. Hosted at Uncle Philip's newly renovated home, our team's gift to him, the gathering was initially awkward but gradually warmed as good food and shared purpose overcame recent history. Thomas played piano after dinner. My father refrained from business criticism, and my mother laughed in a way I hadn't heard in years. Grandmother Rose, watching it all from her place of honor, caught my eye across the room and nodded slightly. We both understood that the family, like the business, had been broken down to its foundation and was being rebuilt stronger. The journey from that devastating voicemail to my new role as CEO taught me that sometimes complete demolition is necessary before reconstruction can begin. In the renovation business, we often discover that structures with solid bones but damaged surfaces require stripping everything back to reveal what's worth saving. Families can be the same way. I now understand that my parents' betrayal, painful as it was, forced a necessary confrontation with dysfunctional patterns that had persisted for generations. Their attempt to exclude me ultimately led to a healthier company structure where talent is recognized regardless of gender or family position. The Mitchell family business continues, though transformed. The legacy my grandparents established endures, though adapted for a new era. And I found my place at the helm not because it was handed to me or because I fought for it, but because it's where I belong by merit and vision. That voicemail saying, "You're out of the family business," didn't end my story. It began a new chapter, one where the business truly became about family again, in all its complicated, imperfect glory. If there's one thing I've learned through this entire ordeal, it's that family justice often comes in unexpected ways. My parents thought they were pushing me out, but instead, they created the conditions for authentic change and growth, for themselves, for me, and for our family legacy.
So, what about you?
Have you ever experienced that moment when a betrayal actually led to something better in the long run? That painful situation that forced necessary change? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Family business drama might feel like the end of the world when you're in it, but sometimes it's just the difficult beginning of a better story. If this journey resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about family dynamics, business challenges, and finding your way through betrayal to something stronger. Share this with someone who might be going through their own family business struggles. Sometimes knowing you're not alone makes all the difference. Thank you for coming along on this journey with me. Remember, sometimes being pushed out of where you thought you belonged is actually the universe making room for where you truly deserve to be. Until next time, this is Cassandra Mitchell, rebuilding stronger than before.